Hi guys, there's a Credential 6-4 handout on Blackboard that you'll need for this lecture. Go ahead and grab that and we'll get started. We are going to start by listening to this score that you have on your handout. This is a song by Louis Reichardt, and it apparently is never performed because I couldn't find a recording of it, so you're going to be stuck with me. I'm not going to sing. I'm just going to play the keyboard part. We're in F minor. I want you to just follow along. Listen, mark any spots that sound cool to you, and we are going to then go through and give it some analysis. Okay, let's go ahead and get through some harmonic analysis. You have a couple options here. After I mark off the chords that you're not responsible for, you're welcome to pause this and try the analysis on your own and come back and see what we go through together, or you can just go through it step by step with me. But first off, there are some harmonies in here that you have not learned yet. This one right here, that's a Theory 2 harmony. So you can skip that one. If you were marking cool spots as you listened, this might have actually been one of the cool ones that you marked. But it is a Theory 2 chord. And let's also put a hold on this one and this guy right here. Now those last two that I marked we are going to do today, but let's pause on them right now. Everything else you know. So let's go ahead and see what we can come up with. F minor, and this actually gets at quite a few of the topics that we covered in class with the Margaret Bonds on Wednesday. So we start out on our tonic triad. I'm going to go to the next downbeat. We're still on that tonic triad. Let's take a look at what we have going on right here. If you look at the right hand, it beautifully spells out the triad for you in its root position. So you've got B flat, D flat, and F. Since we're in F minor, F, G, A flat, B flat, that gives us a 4 chord. But look who's in the bass. So the fifth of that triad is in the bass, which means it's in 6-4 position. And we learned on Wednesday there are very specific ways that 6-4 chords are used. And one of those ways is exactly what we see here. If you look at what the bass is doing, it is just hanging out on that F. So for your label, rather than labeling this a 4-6-4, we are going to label it by its 6-4 function, which is the pedal 6-4. Okay, let's skip the next two chords. We'll come back to them in a second. And we'll go to the downbeat of measure 4. You can see by the E natural you've got a raised leading tone there, which is usually a pretty big hint that we've got some flavor of a dominant. And indeed we have scale degree 5 in the bass. We have a nice 5 triad. This is one of my favorite passages of this excerpt because there's so much tension that develops. A lot of that tension is simply due to non-chord tones. So let's see what we've got going on. We've got this 5 triad. I'm going to go downbeat to downbeat right now. When we enter into the downbeat of the next measure, we get these B flats, and they turn our 5 triad into a 5-7. And then we just change the voicing on the next downbeat, but still at a 5-7. So I've got almost 3 entire bars of dominant. What really makes this passage, though, are the non-chord tones and the slow introduction of dissonance with them. So I'm just going to play those 3 measures again, 2.5 measures. So there's a regular 5 chord, 5 triad. Add the 7th, something cool here, revoiced 5-7. So we go from 5 triad, very end of measure 4, we get these passing tones that bring us up so that we're able to then kind of stack the 7th on via those passing tones. So right there, you've got this pair of passing tones that lead us to our nice fully voiced 5-7. So this 5 turns into a 5-7. And then the second half of that measure, can we just listen to what happens? So here's our 5-7. That goes, so we've got, interestingly, we lose a third in the second half of that measure, right? I think that we also hear that as a 5-7 though. I never, as I'm listening to this, think that that's a different harmony. I still hear it as a dominant. But we get this really cool, interesting introduction of the D flat there that adds this, that nice dissonant minor 9th on top of the bass. And it just, again, it's not passing in a perfect sense because we're not moving by step, right? We've got B flat that moves to D flat, then moves to E natural. So it's not a perfect passing moment, but it feels and it kind of sounds like that D flat is just en route to the E natural. And this is just a big old expansion of the dominant. So big prolongation of the dominant. So let's take stock then of what we have done so far. We've got prolongation of tonic in the very beginning. So I'm going to write kind of in the score, and I'm sorry if it's not super legible. But we've got prolongation of tonic. And then right here, we've got a whole bunch of dominants. Let's talk about that harmony at the very end of that measure with the 5-7. This one, I kind of wrote through the natural on the E, but it's a really chromatic looking chord, but it's actually one that you know. So you've got B flat in the bass, you've got a G, a D flat, and an E natural. Looking at that, find the root. So you've got to rearrange it to find the root. And if you do that, you're going to find that the E natural is actually the root. So E natural in F minor is our leading tone. It is a harmony we haven't seen a whole lot of yet, but it is a 7, fully diminished 7 chord. E natural, G, B flat in the bass, so it is in 4-3. If you remember when we talked about the dominant 7th, we talked about also how the 7 chord acts as a dominant as well because they share so many notes. So this is another piece of that dominant prolongation. And now things get really busy in measure 7. All of a sudden the harmonic rhythm doubles and we're moving through harmonies twice as fast. So let's see what we got. Downbeat, got a 1-6. Second beat, regular old 4 chord. We're going to skip that yellow harmony. Very last beat, we go back to a nice 5-7. And then we, of course, finish up on tonic. All right, let's back up to yellow chord number 1. This is not an unfamiliar chord to you. I just don't think we've seen one in analysis yet. You can tell just by the way it's notated and by the way it's stacked with that second on the top. Now this is a 7th chord, right? Because 7th chords, if you invert them, you're going to get a second somewhere in there. So this is a 7th chord. The top of the second tells you who the root is. So the root is G. We're in F minor. So G would get Roman numeral 2. And if you remember from way back when, I think it was video 5, the quality of the 2 chord Just the 2 triad in minor is diminished. But if you add a 7th to it, the quality goes from fully diminished to half diminished. And then let's figure out the inversion. G is the root, B is in the bass, B flat, so G, B flat, third is in the bass, so 2 half diminished, 6, 5. Now if you were looking for a place to stick the dominant in this harmonic syntax, or the predominant, sorry, there it is. So there's our predominant. Tonic prolongation, predominant, big fat dominant. And then right in measure 7, we slam through all of them really fast, right? We go tonic, predominant. And then this is a little dominant block before we get to tonic. And that brings me to our second yellow chord that we're going to analyze today. Let's take a look at what is going on with this harmony. Look at the right hand for me. Hopefully you haven't written all over the right hand on your score like I have. Look at the right hand, and I want you to tell me what scale degrees are in that harmony. So we're in F minor. You've got 1, 3, and 5. And then you have scale degree 5 in the bass. So if you're thinking inversions, then this is another triad that is in second inversion. And this is the other type of 6/4 triad that I told you that we would get to when we were talking about 6/4s in class on Wednesday. This is our last remaining 6/4. And this is something we call a cadential 6/4. I'm going to label it, and then we're going to talk about why I labeled it the way I did. So this is how we would label this harmony. And I usually put a little bracket underneath my cadential 6/4 and the 5 chord that follows it, because they are basically joined at the hip. Now let's talk about what this harmony is doing, what its function is, and why it is where it is. In terms of harmonic syntax, it came right after a predominant and right before a 5 chord, right before a dominant chord. In this case, it was a 5/7. If you look down at the notes down here, so you might be looking at my label and saying, why did she put a 5 on that? It clearly has the root of scale degree 1. Why is this not a 1/6/4? The answer to that is function. This cadential 6/4, they are tonic triads that happen in second inversion that occur right before a dominant chord, right before a 5 triad or a 5/7. They function as part of this dominant pair. Because of that, because they function as a dominant, we label them as a 5/6/4 rather than a 1/6/4, because the Roman numeral is telling us its function, and it is functioning as a dominant. I have it already marked here as part of the dominant harmonic class. So we label it with a 5. Now, if you're coming to me from previous theory knowledge, some places still label them as 1/6/4. The place where I went to undergrad, we labeled them as 1/6/4. And I had to rewire my brain when I went into a different program for graduate school that did not label them that way. So if you're coming from an AP theory or a previous theory knowledge that did label these as 1/6/4, yes, it happens. It's not completely verboten, but you might have to kind of rearrange your brain a little bit as you get used to the labeling system that we use here, which is to label them as a dominant. Now you also might be looking at that and saying, she labeled that as a 5/6/4, but the quality of the harmony is minor. It's a minor triad. Why does it have a capital letter Roman numeral? The same reason that we label it as a 5 in the first place, because it's functioning as a dominant, and your dominants are going to be major 5 chords. So even though the root is scale degree 1, and even though it's a minor quality triad, we are still labeling it with a capital 5 Roman numeral 6/4. Okay, for the most part, like I said, these are going to be joined at the hip to either a 5 triad or a 5/7. Occasionally, a cadential 6/4 will go to a 5/4-2, and we will see that another day. But for right now, we're going to keep it super simple. Cadential 6/4 goes to 5 or 5/7. Never the other way around. We don't want to introduce the leading tone with a 5/7 and then take it away by going to a cadential 6/4. Always going to be cadential 6/4, 5 or 5/7, and then cadence. Okay. Speaking of cadences, can we go ahead and label the two that we get here? If you haven't done so already. So let's look, measure 4, we get our first one. And we're on just a 5, because remember I said in class or in your last video, or probably both, your half cadences are on just 5s, no 5/7s. And so that was where we had just our regular old 5 chord. And then the very end, we had a root position 5/7 that went to root position 1. We've got scale degree 1 in our uppermost voice. That gives us a nice, strong pack to close. So in just about 12-15 minutes, we got a really good kind of solid analysis of that excerpt. These are all, with one exception, chords that you know and can work with and can apply. Now we know what a cadential 6/4 is and know how it looks in the wild. Let's talk about how we create them in a 4-voice texture. So cadential 6/4, scale degree 5 is always going to be in the bass. And you are always, always, always going to double it. Why? Because it's behaving like a 5 chord. And if it were just a 5 chord, you would want to double the root. So we want 2 scale degree 5s in your cadential 6/4. You're going to double the bass. Then, if your cadential 6/4 is going to just a 5 chord, so going to just a regular 5 triad, you've got 2 voices in that cadential 6/4 that are not scale degree 5. You've got 1 and you've got 3, right? They are both going to move as little as possible. 1 is going to step down to 7 for your 5 chord, and 3 will step down to 2. Keep both of your scale degree 5s. That is not considered parallel octaves. Keep them both. Simple is fine, so keep both of those scale degree 5s. Now, in the event that your cadential 6/4 goes to a 5/7 instead, you've got that doubled scale degree 5, just step it down to 4. So you're just going to move that doubled 5 down to scale degree 4 for your 5/7. 1 goes down to 7, 3 goes down to 2. There's your fully voiced 5/7. Everybody's happy. In the event that you're writing your own progression or just writing your own music in general and want to use a cadential 6/4, cadential 6/4s occur in metrically strong places. So if we go back to the right heart, the cadential 6/4 happens on beat 3 of the measure. We're in 4/4. Our strong beats in 4/4 are beat 1, which is the strongest, and then beat 3, which in the hierarchy of beat strength is next. The cadential 6/4 is going to land on a metrically stronger beat than the 5 that follows it. So we want our cadential 6/4 to be in a metrically strong spot, and then it resolves to the 5 or 5/7 on the weaker beat. Okay, we're going to do double duty with this part writing. We are going to do some part writing with the cadential 6/4, and we are also going to put some 7ths on our 2 chords. You saw 2, 6, 5 in the right heart. We are now going to part write a little bit with some 7th chords with the predominant. The same rule for 2 7s applies that I've been barking about for 5 7s, in that your chordal 7th is going to resolve down. I don't care what kind of 7th chord it is, a 6/7, a 2/7, a very rare 4/7. Your chordal 7th is always going to resolve down, whatever type of 7th chord. So let's talk about what scale degrees we're dealing with then. So a 2/7 is scale degrees 2, 4, 6, and 1. So that means that in your 2 7s, scale degree 1 is the 7th that is going to need to resolve down in the next harmony. Now, I do have a little note here in italics that says, in a 2/7, the chordal seventh is 1. If you go from a 2/7 to a cadential 6/4, which is what we're doing in both of these, the cadential 6/4 also has scale degree 1 in it. So your chordal seventh for the 2/7 can't resolve down just yet. It has to sort of hang out on scale degree 1 for one more harmony, and then it resolves down to 7. That is fine. The cadential 6/4 just delays the resolution, and that is absolutely okay. Last thing before we walk through one of these, I want you to take a look at the figured bass that's here. So I actually do not have a second Roman numeral here saying another 5 chord. These figures just show the resolution for you. So the 6th above the bass, which is scale degree 3, is going to resolve down. And the 4th above the bass, which is scale degree 1, is also going to resolve down. Similarly, if you have a full cadential 6/4 that's going to a 5/7, this just shows everybody's resolution down by step. You may or may not see that kind of in the wild. I have R2C programmed right now to give it to you fully. A lot of times we don't write it out completely. It's just kind of assumed. So I wanted to give you the full effect now, and you might see some shorthand versions of it later on in the semester. Let's go ahead and let's walk through the first one together. If you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and just pause this, do it on your own, and then fast forward and double check your work. But if you want to walk through the first one with me, we're going to go ahead and do that. So we are in G minor. I'm going to sketch out my bass line first because that is easier for me and makes me happy. So, oh, that was really very large. So I've got scale degree 1 because it's a 1 chord. 2, 6, 5. If you are a letter name person, let's go ahead and spell that out. So scale degree 2 gives us A, and then we're stacking thirds. A, C, E flat, the flat comes in from the key signature, and G. Since it's a 6/5, so it's in first inversion, the C is in the bass. So I'm going to go ahead and put that there. And then we've got a cadential 6/4, which has scale degree 5 in the bass. And that goes to a regular 5 chord. And then resolves to tonic. So we've got our nice bass line sketched out. Now I'm going to fill in the upper voices. Again, this is totally your call, how you might choose to do this. If we all have the same upper voices though to start, it's going to be easier for you to troubleshoot and check your work. So go forth and work on this on your own if you want to. If you want to go by step with me, we'll keep on going. Okay, 2, 6, 5. So we've got our C taken care of. We need an A, we need an E flat, we need a G. If I'm looking at my tonic triad, I've got a G already kind of ready-made in the alto, so I'm going to go ahead and just keep it. Less is more when it comes to part writing when you're just learning something. I need an E flat. That looks like that would go really nicely in the soprano. And I need an A, which looks again like it would fit really beautifully in the tenor. So there's our nice fully voiced 2/7. I'm going to go ahead and just for myself, I'm going to circle my chordal 7th of that 2/7. Just so I know to keep track of it, so I can be sure that I resolve it properly. All right, cadential 6/4. Who do we double in a cadential 6/4? We double the bass. So I need another D somewhere. I just came off of a D in my soprano from the first chord, so I'm going to go ahead and go back there. And then a cadential 6/4 is a tonic voiced triad. So you have the members of the tonic triad. So we also need a G and we need a B flat. Again, I have that G ready-made in the alto, and the B flat is very easy to get to from the tenor. because the cadential 6/4 suspends the chordal 7th of the 2/6/5, I'm going to make sure that I still am tracking it. And now let's bring this cadential 6/4 to a regular old 5 chord. I get to keep the D in the soprano, and my other two voices just bloop, down by step. So tenor goes down by step to A, alto goes down by step. Don't forget to raise your leading tone to F sharp. And that gives me, finally, my tendency tone resolution. My chordal 7th has now resolved down by step. Let's go ahead and resolve this guy. You are in the home stretch. Keep the D there. I'm going to go up to G here, so I'm going to resolve my leading tone up. And then last but not least, I need a third. So I'm going to resolve the tenor up to give me my third. I have a nice, fully voiced triad. So here we are. Here was our tonic triad. Here's our 2/6/5, sorry. Listen to the quality of this. And then cadential 6/4, 5, and 1. Okay, now what I would like you to do, if you haven't already shut me up and gone off to work on your own, is to do the second one on your own. A couple of things to keep in mind, though. First is we are going from a root position 1 to a root position 2/7. If you remember from your first predominant lecture, I said to be double dog careful whenever you're moving from consecutive Roman numerals. In that case, it was when you're moving from 4 to 5, and they're in the same inversion, so root position 4 to root position 5. Here we have a root position 1 to a root position 2/7. I need you to look out for parallel fifths because it's really easy to walk into that trap. Another thing to note is there is a really good chance that for this 2/7, you're going to want to voice it in an incomplete way. So just as a reminder, incomplete 7th chords. You need a root, you need a third, you need a 7th. If you're going to build an incomplete 7th chord, you get rid of the 5th and double the root. So keep that in mind when you get to the 2/7, you very well might have to do that. Okay? Off you go, and then when you come back, we will check our work with one another. Okay, let's see how you did. Now, if you have your upper voices voiced differently, for the most part, if you just find whatever upper voice you have that starts on scale degree 5, it should look a lot like my tenor line, no matter where it is. Find your upper voice that starts on G sharp scale degree 3, it should look a lot like my alto line, just in case we did not voice this the same way. Your bass line can be, you could have started up here. That's fine too. I found that I got really close to my tenor voice when I did that, so I moved it down the octave. Let's talk then. You will notice that I do indeed have an incomplete 2/7 here. Now, it's very, very tempting as you're looking at that first triad, as you're building your 2/7, to say, I need a C. I'm going to move whoever is on that B up to a C. If you do that, you just built yourself a beautiful set of parallel fifths. And that's why I said you've got to be careful when you're moving consecutive Roman numerals like that. Because of that, because you cannot have parallel fifths under any circumstance, you've got to kind of give up your full 7th chord so that you can avoid the parallel fifths. And instead, you end up with 2 roots, a third, and a 7th. Now you notice here I marked that my chordal 7th and the 2/7 again is suspended into the next beat before it's able to resolve down to scale degree 7. And then with my cadential 6/4 going to the 5/7, this is where I had my doubled bass for the cadential 6/4. And then that doubled bass steps down, so scale degree 5 turns down to scale degree 4 to build the 7th of the 5/7, and then that is also a tendency tone. It also has to resolve down. Now, because of the voicing the way I had it, I ended up again with an incomplete triad at the end because I can't move my chordal seventh up. You cannot resolve scale degree 4 up to 5 from a 5-7. So that chordal seventh has to resolve down. That's just the way it is. So because of that, you get a little bit of a pinch in terms of fully voicing that final tonic triad. Because the way I have this voiced, I can't move the alto up here because then it's too far from the tenor. And I can't move it down here because then it's too far from the soprano. The leading tone is in an outer voice, so it has to resolve up to 1. So my only real other option is to go ahead and have a tripled root. 3 roots and a third is preferable to 2 roots and 2/3. So if you did resolve your alto up here, or wherever that voice was, if you did resolve it up that way, it's technically not incorrect. It's just not preferable. If you can do 3 roots and 1/3, it's preferable to 2 roots and 2/3. Okay. Well, that is your introduction to the cadential 6/4 as well as the 2/7 and its inversions. In our 2C, so due on Wednesday, you have a slightly different assignment. You're going to have to log into Blackboard and our 2C at the same time. The score excerpts are on Blackboard. I could not get my code to run properly to just show them on our 2C. So the score excerpts are in a PDF on Blackboard. My suggestion is pull it up in one tab and then open our 2C in another tab or another browser window, because the first part of our 2C is just part writing with the 2/7 and the cadential 6/4. And then the second part asks a few questions about the excerpts in terms of harmonic analysis and mostly cadence identification. There are multiple choice questions, so I would suggest you have 2 windows open so you can toggle back and forth and look at the score and then look at the question. Alternatively, you can print the handout out as well if you're like me and you like to handwrite things. Both are fine options, but just giving you a heads up. That is due on Wednesday at class time, and then for class on Wednesday, you actually don't need anything. We are going to do a kind of listening focused activity, and it'll be all through Google Docs, so you won't need hard copy stuff, so you get a break from that. All right, guys, thank you. I'll see you on Wednesday.